Welcome to Uncommon Sense, where ordinary financial wisdom just doesn't cut it. Follow along with Eric Bowman as he provides clarity in a cluttered financial world.
Hey everybody, Eric Bowman here from Bowman Financial Strategies and the Uncommon Sense podcast. With me today is Ben George. How are you doing today, Ben?
I'm great, Eric. Good to see you again.
Yep. So Ben's going to help keep us on track with good questions that we have heard from the audience before, as well as helps us with really good production. We're just excited to have him with us today. So today I was doing a little bit of reading, and we have an article from the Wall Street Journal talking about 401k choices. What do you do with your 401k? I think the primary question, Ben, is they're really asking is, should I keep my 401k when I retire or when I quit a job, or should I roll my 401k into some other type of account? That seems to be the big question. But then we want to talk about the pros and cons of that decision.
Yeah, I think this is a very common question now for people too, because it seems pretty natural for people to change jobs now. I think we've gone away from the years where our parents would start working out of college, work for 35, 40 years with one company, retire and be set. Now we're kind of bouncing around a little bit. And with that, we have old 401ks. I know I've got one or two that I still have from an old employer. My wife's got one or two. So I'm curious to kind of see the best kind of practices with the rollover.
Yeah, and that's one scenario. Another scenario would be, let's imagine that you're 60 years old, you're still working, very common, and you have a 401k and maybe some IRAs floating around, but you're in your last 401k of your life, and now you want to do some retirement planning. So in that scenario, how do you handle the potential move of a 401k? Are you even allowed to move that 401k if you're still employed? That's a big question too. So why don't we answer your first question, which is, if you're switching jobs and you're accumulating 401ks from all those previous jobs, well, the one thing that you can do, and the milestone that allows you to do this, is separating from service. So you quit a job, then you have this 401k. They aren't going to make you typically move it right away unless it has an extremely low account balance. They might do some type of what they call a safe harbor move and make you take it out. But generally speaking, you would roll those over into an IRA. So a qualified rollover is the method of repositioning the assets from an old 401k into an IRA, and you can do that from multiple 401ks so long as you're separated from service. That way we'll handle the questions about what are the pros and cons of being in the IRA versus the 401k. So that's one. The other one is, what if you're still working, but let's say you're 60 years old? Completely different set of rules there. There's something called the in-service rollover rule. And what that means is, so long as you're 59 and a half or older, the federal government allows a 401k to allow you to relocate your assets into an IRA and still contribute to that 401k. They don't close the account down. They just zero it out, bring it to a zero account balance. They allow you to move it into an IRA, and then you can still contribute. And then when you finally retire, maybe in a year or two, you remove the remaining assets and roll them over tax deferred into an IRA. So those are the two kind of separate profiles I would see.
Okay, so I would imagine most people that come across this video would fall into one of those two categories with a 401k. So I've heard about the rollover, why it's probably a good idea, why I should at least consider it. But why actually move that money, Eric? What are some of the benefits to actually getting it out of that 401k and moving it into an IRA?
Excellent question. One of the general benefits that applies to both of those scenarios would be you simply have more choices. You have control. If you roll your money over into Schwab, for example, you have the entire world of exchange traded funds, mutual funds, individual stocks, for example, which you can't find individual stocks in most 401k plans unless maybe they're the stock of that company itself. So one of the reasons is to really increase your selection of investments that are simply not found inside of a 401k.
Okay, so that I know for a lot of people, your 401k, you have a few different investments that you make and you kind of just let it be. But you're saying now, if you move that over to IRA, you got a lot more options at your disposal and gives you a little more, I guess, room to grow. potentially.
Yeah. I mean, in particular, when you're thinking about that 60-year-old that has now entered into a retirement planning process. So they're going through a process, engagement with us is a multi-step process of understanding the client and then developing an investment methodology. Some of those investments are simply not allowed or found inside of a 401k. So there could be a rationale for brokerage accounts using buffered ETFs as one tool that we use. So those are unique ETFs with protections on the downside. They give you access to the S&P 500 or NASDAQ, just as an example, but they're built by an option strategy that you just can't find inside of a 401k. Another thing is many people are trying to generate future income streams or have access to other types of annuities. So you can create income from annuities. You can also seek protected growth from annuities. Well, those annuities are not found inside of 401ks. So if you want to have access to them and you want to maintain that IRA type tax deferral, you have to move it out of the 401k into an IRA. And then one of the investment options you can do within the context of an IRA would be, for example, you could create an IRA income annuity that you could turn on down the road, something that's just simply not available in the 401k. And one thing we need to keep in mind is it takes time for some of those tools to do their thing, to percolate and grow and do what you want them to do so they create an income stream down the road. If you wait until you retire at 67 and you say, well, now I want to turn on annuity income, if you didn't set that in place maybe 5 years prior to allow the guarantees to provide a higher income stream that require years of deferral, you might find yourself wanting an income stream, but because you wanted to start the day you retire, but you never repositioned assets, you're not going to have the highest magnitude of income potential.
I know if you're watching this and kind of curious to learn more about this and what your options are, maybe what investments you should be in after you roll over, again, bowmanfinancialstrategies.com. Tax efficiency is a big thing for you too, Eric. I know we've talked about it here on this show and on this channel. What do we need to know about taxes as it relates to the IRA versus the 401k?
Very good question. So most people don't know this, but if you keep your 401k, and some people might just say, hey, I love my 401k. It treated me so well while I was working. What they're really saying is the market went straight up while I was working and I happen to have been invested in the market, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what they mean, because 401ks are not humans. They don't do anything for you except provide you access to the markets. If you're invested and the market goes up, you're going to make money, and a lot of them do. It's a good thing. However, 401ks make really good accumulation tools. They do not perform quite as well in the distribution phase of retirement. And here's one reason why. When you take out money as a distribution, so I'm separating that from a rollover. When you make a distribution from a 401k, the federal government mandates that you take 20% withholding for the federal government. You have to do it. There's not a state requirement to withhold taxes from a 401k, but the feds mandate that you withhold 20% for federal taxes. So what's the downside of that? What if you're only in the 12% effective tax bracket? You're literally withholding 8% extra in taxes. Yeah, you'll get it back at the end of the year when you file your taxes because you will have over withheld. But the downside is that money is no longer inside of a tax deferred account. So it's no longer sheltered from potential taxes. So you're going to find that your 401k value will decrease more quickly because you're having to take more out of it, both for what you want and need to spend, but the extra withholding that has to go to the federal government. Let's contrast that with an IRA. When you make a distribution from an IRA, you have complete flexibility on how much federal tax you withhold. You could withhold no taxes. You could withhold 10%, 12%, 22%, you name it. You can withhold whatever you want. For our clients, the way we handle that is we have special software that lets us calculate what their taxes will actually look like over the course of a year because we have insight into what their various income streams are going to be. And then we withhold that amount from their federal taxes so that we can get really close to, at the end of the year, what's perfection when it comes to doing your taxes? You don't get a refund, but you don't owe anything. That means the perfect amount of taxes were withheld. I'm not insinuating we can accomplish that every year, but we want to get as close to that as possible. It's the most financially efficient method. IRAs give you a way better chance of making that happen.
Okay. It's a couple very clear benefits to rolling it over. Anything else you want to consider if you're still kind of thinking, maybe I'll keep my money in my 401k for now? I'm not quite sold yet.
Yeah, you can take multiple 401ks, which are going to be primarily pre-tax contributions, and then those can go into an IRA because IRA dollars are also pre-tax, which means at distribution, you're going to be taxed ordinary income tax rates. So consolidation of accounts, more choices inside of the IRA, which I think becomes really handy, particularly when it comes to planning for retirement. And fees are one of those kind of concerns too, right? There are pros and cons to fees. In a 401k, depending on the business side, the fees can be through the roof high, or they may be lower than what you might find elsewhere. It really depends on your personal 401k plan and the company you work for. When you move to an IRA, if you self-manage it, well, there'll be no fees if you use one of the big clearing houses like Schwab or a Fidelity, because they don't charge a fee for you to keep an IRA there if you're going to do the trading. At our firm, we're retirement planners. We manage assets. We indeed do charge a fee for managing assets, but that fee not only is for investment management, that fee covers every aspect of retirement planning, from income planning, Social Security, pension planning, the investment planning itself, tax planning when it comes to trying to find the most efficient and effective way to distribute assets and pay the least amount of tax as possible. The reality is, though, you have some control over your fees inside of the IRA, where you're simply beholden to the fee structure of the 401k when the money stays there.
Social Security planning can be complex, but you don't have to navigate it alone. Visit our one-stop Social Security resource at bowmanfinancialstrategies.com. Discover detailed videos, downloadable PDF guides, and the latest updates from the Social Security Administration. Don't let Social Security questions hold you back. Click the link in the show description and bring Social Security into focus.
Is there any reason why you would move, if you have multiple 401ks, any reason why you would move one or two, but not all of them? Is there any reason why you would split it up and maybe keep some money behind?
If you're no longer working there, I personally can't really think of too many. You got your money in a bunch of different buckets. It's harder to track because of lack of consolidation. It's an interesting thought. I don't know too many 401ks or any that have such a unique provision that it just makes sense to keep it there. So I'd rather have direct control over it in a more consolidated fashion myself.
Okay, and last question I had, I know when I looked into rollover for the first time, there's nothing tax-wise that's going to happen in that move, right? When you move the 401k to the rollover, you're not getting taxed on anything at that point, correct?
Yeah, three concerns people would have, that being one of them. So long as you follow the rules, and we do this all the time, so we're very cognizant of the rules. If you do what's called a qualified direct rollover, so that's key terminology, Ben, is direct rollover. That means it goes from custodian, let's say your 401k is run by Vanguard, and it's going to roll into an IRA at Schwab. Those two companies are custodians. So if you go direct rollover, custodian to custodian, it's going to be a tax-free rollover, meaning you're going to maintain your tax deferral and you will not pay taxes until you perform a distribution, which is different than a rollover. So in the future, then, when you distribute from your IRA, then you'll have taxes. Another concern of making an in-service rollover when you're 60 years old and you want to move your money into your IRA, but you're still working and you want to keep your 401k active. Many people think as soon as you move the money out, they're going to close your 401k down. They don't. It's called an in-service rollover. So long as you're 59 and a half, that's the exception. You can move it out. Your 401k stays in force. It may be empty for a month, but then the next month you make contributions to it and it's back invested again in whatever choices you had in that 401k. So those are the primary concerns is, number one, will I be taxed when I move the money? Not if you do it right. And number two, will they still keep the account open and allow me to continue to contribute into the 401k? And indeed, in every case I've ever seen, you absolutely can.
All right. Great information. Again, if you have any questions, 303-222-8034. Now, obviously, it's not a no-brainer. Not everybody needs to do a rollover, or else they would just come to you and say, Eric, let's go ahead and roll the money over. So why would you decide I need to actually keep this money in a 401k? When does it benefit you to leave it there?
I think it's when you have no other options. You just want to have a very basic mutual fund to choose from that's available in the 401k. You're not doing any significant planning for the future other than accumulating assets. And it's your active 401k at your current employer. If you have multiple 401ks that are just hanging around, I actually don't see a good reason for that, because shoot, you might forget about one of them. Think about that. There are people that have accounts they don't even realize they have. And just to back up on that one second, that is one of the risks, right? I have an actual example of a client that worked for FedEx. And so he came in, he was literally the year of retirement. We did the full retirement plan. And this may sound cliche, but it's not. They're living on a boat in Tahiti right now, running a scuba school. So that's what their dream was, and they're living their dream right now. But he said, I used to work for FedEx. I knew I had an account with them, and I have no idea where it is. I don't know what the value is. I recall it being, I don't know, maybe $50,000 way back then. And we're talking the 1990s. We found that account for him. We called and, worked with the plan administrator, had to go through a bunch of historical, custodian type investigations to figure it out. He had over $600,000 inside of that 401k. It is a complete surprise. That bought the boat, or the majority of the boat, for their scuba school they run in Tahiti now. But if you don't somehow consolidate and track all these 401ks, 40 years goes by, that could happen, so why have the risk, I'd say.
Yeah, very interesting to hear that. All right, if you have questions, again, bowmanfinancialstrategies.com, 303-222-8034. And I guess this is a good place to start, right, with you, Eric, if somebody's looking to do some planning and hadn't really thought about it a lot, but wants to do a rollover, maybe wants to take that next step. This is something they come into and kind of begin that process with, right?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of ways. You can call the office. You can click on a Calendly link. There's a button in the show notes. You can go to our website, and there's places where you can actually seek out my calendar and schedule a time that's comfortable and makes sense for you. And then we just go through a nice process. Originally, it would simply be a brief 15-minute call to understand what you're looking to accomplish, determine if I can help, and if so, we'll determine what the next steps are and what makes sense. If you just need a brief analysis, hey, can I move my money from a 401k to an IRA? We can typically decipher that on an initial call. So we can answer a lot of different questions, but if more thorough engagement makes sense, we talk through what that looks like, and then we put that in place.
Awesome. Well, some really good information on why you would want to maybe consider strongly a rollover from that 401k into an IRA, and a lot of benefits that come along with that. So thanks for taking us through that, Eric.
Yep, you're welcome. Thanks a lot. And everybody, thanks for watching the Uncommon Sense podcast today. My name's Eric Bowman, and I look forward to seeing you next time. And Ben, thanks a lot for being on the podcast with me.
You got it.